Welcome to SOS for Your Life, Emergency Wisdom for Everyday Life. I'm your host, Susie St. Angelo, and thanks for being here. Today's episode is called Qigong, Passion for Life. Today I'll be talking to John Munro, founder of Long White Cloud Qigong, an international Qigong school with over 450 instructors worldwide. John is so passionate about Qigong, where he learned it at a young age and was dealing with health issues. So listen in. I'm sure you'll find a good tip or two as well. So this podcast is for you if you know you want to change something, and maybe it's a career or your health or something else, and you're not sure if this is the right age or stage to do this. And you don't know maybe how to start, or maybe you're caught in analysis paralysis. I know, I understand. I was that way too. But please know, there's a step or two, a tip or two, or some knowledge you might gain by tuning in to my podcast. So just a reminder, you can find this podcast on Spotify, YouTube, iHeart, Amazon, and Apple platforms. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Now let's get into today's episode and meet my guest, John Munro. Good morning, John.
Hello, Susie.
Thank you for being on SOS for Your Life, Emergency Wisdom for Everyday Life. I'm excited to talk to you today about Qigong.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. I love talking about Qigong. I do a lot of it.
I'm sure you do. So tell me about yourself. Tell me about your background and how you became so knowledgeable and an expert in Qigong.
Sure. Well, I might as well go right back to the beginning. My first exposure to Qigong was through my mother. And I had a lot of health issues when I was growing up as a child. And at least partly due to those health issues, because we weren't getting a lot of progress working with just Western medicine. And so my mother trained to become a naturopath, looking for other options of how she could help me with my health. Now, she did go on and have a successful practice as a naturopath as well, so it wasn't all about me, But that was a big part of her motivation at that time. And so when she was at naturopath college, of course, they have their core subjects, but as well as that, they would have a range of different guest lecturers come in and talk to them about different approaches to health that were natural, so that they would know at least a little bit of what they could recommend to their clients later on when they were out in their clinical practice. So they had someone come in and teach just a little bit of Qigong. And my mother thought that was pretty cool, and so she came home and showed all of her kids, me being one of them, and I was probably about 10 years old at the time, and I thought it was pretty cool too, and that really stuck with me. As a young child, it was a little bit like being a Jedi, being able to feel my own energy, and so that stuck with me, and I continued to play with those very simple Qigong practices. It was really just a very little bit, but I continued to play with those as I grew up and through my teenage years. And then as a young adult, I came into contact with the same person who had actually taught my mother that little bit at naturopath college. And I asked him if he was still teaching Qigong, and more particularly if he would teach me. And he said, yes, he could teach me, but he would only teach me if I also studied Chinese medicine. So it ended up being a substantial commitment. It wasn't just turn up to a class once a week or something. So I studied Chinese medicine and Qigong formally. And then from there, so I went into clinical practice using Qigong and Chinese medicine. Later on, I eventually got into Kung Fu associated with that as well to sort of broaden my understanding. And it's ended up being a big part of basically my entire adult life.
Mm-hmm. There's a reoccurring theme I seem to hear, and even with my own story with a number of my guests, that they come into what they're doing because of health issues either at a young age or as an adult. And so it really forms the basis of what they do in life.
Yeah, look, and it makes a lot of sense, really. I don't think we should allow our health issues to define us as such, you know. I don't think it should be the one thing that, everything revolves around. I think that can, in a way, become a distraction for us. But when we've had a challenge that we've had to put a lot of effort into, naturally that does shape us to some extent. And if it so happens that it shapes us in an area where we actually naturally have an interest as well, so much the better, And so it can really turn something that, well, maybe was negative in some ways into something that can become really positive in our lives.
Hmm. Was there much? Was there much offered uh, when you were first learning it?
When I was first doing Qigong, it was very hard to find almost any Qigong anywhere. Like, yeah, it was almost unheard of. Nowadays, talking to people, a lot of people are like, "Oh, qigong." I mean, more people are hearing about it now, absolutely, but still, a lot of people think, "Oh, yeah, not many people know about it." And it's like, yeah, go back 20, 30 years. No one, almost no one knew about it then. It was a very hard thing to find. So yeah, it was an unusual thing, and that was why for me, when I ended up studying Chinese medicine and qigong, that was really the only way that I could learn at that time, and that's why I was willing to take on that quite substantial commitment, because there wasn't an option of just going along to a class or something like that. It was kind of do it properly or don't do it at all. So, and I was like, oh, this is fascinating. I want to do this.
Well, and we'll talk about what it is in just a moment. But for people who want to learn it, where would you suggest they go to find out if there's a place nearby where they live?
Sure. So, look, there are more and more resources now, and that's a great thing. There are lots more teachers teaching local classes. Not everywhere yet, though. It's not that common that everyone's going to be able to find something in their neighborhood. But if you can, fantastic. So the easiest place to begin looking nowadays, of course, is on the internet. And you can just start with a simple thing like Qigong classes near me. If you go to, so my website, I've trained lots of teachers, and there is a section which has instructors, and you can look them up and find out if there happens to be one of them in a city near you. And there's quite a few, like we've got hundreds of them. So there's a chance there might be. Um, if you're in the US, there's an association called the National Qigong Association. So that's the NQA, and that's a great association which has lots of instructors as well. So those would be some good places to look initially online. And of course, you can look in your local community centers, things like that. Now, if you can't find a teacher right near you, of course, one of the other wonderful things with technology today is it's now much easier to also learn a lot of things online if you want to. So again, lots of different resources. If you go to my website, of course, there's going to be some good resources to get you started if you're interested to do it that way as well.
And you know what, John? We will towards the end. We'll let our viewers and listeners know where they can find you and your website. And you know what? I think that's really important too. That technology has really allowed more people to learn about things that were not as accessible 20 years ago, like you said. And so,
Yeah, absolutely. It was very difficult. And again, whether it was in person or online, there was very little of either. But now there's a lot more available in person and a lot more available online. I was actually talking to a good friend of mine, who he's actually the president of the National Qigong Association in the US, and he was telling me some research that says that right now, today, 73% of people are actually doing their Qigong online, because it's so accessible. Now, there's something really special about doing it in person if you can, but clearly, if you can't find someone in person, that doesn't have to be a barrier to you. There's really good resources available online as well.
are there dedicated studios for just Qigong, or is it usually combined with another art?
Yeah, there's there wouldn't be many studios just dedicated for Qigong. Most commonly, like you might find it inside a yoga studio. There's lots of yoga studios that sometimes have some Qigong as well. You might find it inside a martial arts studio. You might find it inside a traditional Chinese medicine or acupuncture clinic. They might also offer some Qigong, as well as in community centers and things like that.
Oh, good to know. So let's go back and let's talk about one, how you spell Qigong, and
Okay, yes.
two, what is Qigong?
Yeah, okay, that's a good starting point. So the spelling can be a little bit confusing if you're not familiar with the Chinese language. So for a start, Qigong comes from China. So the standard way of spelling Qigong is Qi, that's Qi, and Gong is Gong. So Qigong, Qigong. That's the standard common way of spelling it. You may sometimes see it spelt other ways because again, it's a transliteration from Chinese. So another way you might see it spelled is Chi for Qi. And again, different ways to spell the second part, but Kung is another way that you can see the second part spelled. So what does that mean? So Qi, I think a lot of people have heard of Qi these days. Even if they haven't heard of Qigong, they've heard of Qi because Qi means energy. And I think a lot of people have heard about this concept of energy and living energy. And that's what that part of the word means. Gong means work or skill. And so there's an implication that we gain skill by working, by practicing. And so Qigong is any of the practices that we do to develop skill with our energy. So it does encompass, well, actually quite a vast variety of different practices. But within them all, there are three tools that are commonly used. Sometimes there are some additional ones that are used, but three main tools that we use. And so that's the mind, the body, and the breath. So that's pretty cool. They're things that we have with us all the time. And we use that as a way to connect to, become aware of our energy, and then start to develop skill with it. Now, you can apply that skill in lots of different ways. One of the main ways that most people are interested in is for their health. And that's a good one. You start to
Very good
become aware of
one.
your energy, use it to become healthy and well. Historically, it was applied in other ways as well, and that's useful for us to understand because we can apply them in similar ways today as well. So it was also applied to martial arts. I mentioned earlier, after doing my initial training, I also got into Kung Fu because there are some different aspects that come out from studying the energy in that context. And in particular, even if you're not interested in martial arts, that type of application is interesting if you're interested in peak performance. So not just being healthy, but really sometimes being able to do some things that are quite extraordinary with your mind and with your body. And then the third area that Qigong was commonly applied to was actually different aspects of spirituality or even religions. Some religions would use Qigong as part of their practices. Not that the Qigong itself is a religion, but rather those religions found that the way Qigong develops our sensitivity, our subtle awareness of how we respond to things, how we respond to the world around us, that this gives a greater understanding, both of ourselves and of our connection to the world around us. And so quite a few different spiritual disciplines found that was useful as a way to develop towards, whatever their purposes were. And again, I think that's very relevant in today's day and age. It doesn't matter what your religious or spiritual background is. You can use the tools of Qigong as a way to develop that sensitivity, that awareness that will help to support you within your spirituality. And certainly amongst my own students, I have, a lot of people, as is common nowadays, are maybe agnostic or, not particularly religious. But I do have some who are very religious in different spiritual traditions. And they find that, whatever their spiritual tradition is, that the Qigong actually helps and supports them in that.
Mm-hmm. That's great to know. I was going to ask you about that side of it. So how did Qigong, without, you going into detail about your own personal health, but how did it help your health? I mean, um, What did you notice change?
Yeah. So I had a variety of different health issues, but one of the biggest ones that was very persistent while I was young was I had a lot of issues with my breathing. I had asthma and I had pneumonia. A lot of times my lungs collapsed at least a couple of times. I was in and out of hospital, and that was just an ongoing issue for me. And I had done, I had learned a few different things about breathing and so on, but I never gained a full understanding of breathing until I I learnt more about it in the context of Qigong. And so that's something, very clear that I was able to, and while I'd already made progress, I was able to sort of resolve the last parts of any issues that I had with my breathing from growing up. Going beyond that, again, the Qigong, because it's not just about our breath. The breath plays a big role within it, of course, but it helps us to develop this awareness inside ourselves of what's going on as we become aware of our energy. Part of that is becoming quite aware of, like, quite literally what's going on within our body, within our organs. And so that also helps me to, overcome and work with other challenges that I had as well.
hmm it's interesting you should say that because I became a certified breathwork facilitator last year, and I've had conversations with other breathwork facilitators um, on this podcast, and there's another reoccurring theme, and that's finding tools in our toolbox when we need them for life's challenges, and whether it's a physical health challenge or it's an anxiety or depression, pulling those things out that are going to help us and help us thrive.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that I think is really valuable about Qigong is, I suppose it depends on how what focus you bring to it, of course. But within it, there is this potential for it to be a very practical and grounded way to understand ourselves and our energy. Because again, our main tools are our mind, our body, and our breath. And so without getting carried away into other things, we're like noticing, okay, what's really going on inside me? Why am I breathing that way? How does that connect to my emotions? What is this posture telling me about myself? And then it gives us tools that we can use to work with that and to fine tune. And if we're doing some things that aren't so helpful for ourselves, to actually go, well, I could do this differently and allow my energy to flow more freely as a result of it.
Yeah, and I think that self-awareness piece too is something that I learned later in life, and I know a number of people they know something's not right, whether it's an anxiety or maybe some energy is trapped somewhere in their body, but they're just not sure how to release it.
Yeah, and it's having those tools to help you to then figure out, what is it that I need to do here, rather than just being a vague, unclear. There's something to actually be able to connect and understand what it is that needs to change.
So, are there levels of proficiency in Qigong? Do you move up a ladder, or is it just based on continuing the practice of?
Yeah, look, of course, it's something that you develop more proficiency and skill over time. Again, that gong part, it means skill, but it also means work. And it's like, it's implied that the two are connected. And the more you work, the more skill you get. It's not that there's, any specific officially recognized, you know, hierarchy, but certainly you develop over time. And often some of the most fascinating times are when you first start, because of course you learn a lot to begin with, because there's lots that you didn't know, and you're discovering all these things. But then, even years, even decades later, you continue to discover more and understand things better. And that's certainly the case for me. As I mentioned, this has been the main focus of my entire adult life. So over, I'll just say more than one decade, more than 2 decades even. Um, I've put a lot of attention, a lot of time and practice into this, and I continue to regularly gain new insights and new understanding, because there's always more to understand.
hmm And so you train people all over the world, correct?
Yeah, that's right. Yes. So one of the big things that I do is I train other instructors. So it went, way back, as I said, when I first started doing Qigong, it was very hard to find any. And I, when I first started, I was using Qigong very much in the context of my clinical practice. But then eventually I started to teach more, and I became involved with some of the professional associations related to this as well. And as secretary of one of those professional associations in New Zealand, as well as just through my own website, I would quite regularly get emails from people around New Zealand, but also in other parts of the world, just saying, "Hey, I can't find a qigong teacher near me. What can I do?" And often I would just have to reply and say, "Sorry, I don't know anyone," because I didn't. And even searching on the internet, I couldn't find anything. And so one of the things I did over a period of time was, one, I started doing some teaching myself online. And then I thought, what would be even better would be actually to empower people who have the passion to learn Qigong to be able to become teachers themselves. And then they could become that teacher in their local area and offer it to other people. So I started to offer online instructor trainings, and that's been, it's been very, very successful in terms of I've been very happy with the quality of instructors that have come out of that and been able to really share Qigong with their communities.
So it's like a teacher training program.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, quite comprehensive teacher training programs. Yeah, I do 200-hour teacher training programs, and I do several different ones focusing on different aspects of Qigong. So people can, if there's an area that they're particularly interested in, they might, focus on that part and learn practices and all the theory and philosophy and fundamentals of that, so that they can understand it really well for themselves. A lot of people actually do the instructor training just for themselves because they want to really learn it properly and really understand it. But what I find is, even amongst the people who start one of the courses thinking that they just want to do it for themselves, by the time they get to the end of the course, it's quite common for them to feel so passionate about it that they then tell me, what, I've decided I am going to teach, and even if that's just teaching one class a week or something, they're like, I want to share this with other people. So that's a really nice thing to see as well.
Well, that has to be fulfilling.
Yeah, absolutely. I like to think I only really, I mean, I feel good about Qigong. I always have, it's something I'm passionate about and about sharing. I only really thought about it in this way. I think it was sometime last year, at a conversation I had with someone, that in a very real way, in a sense, by doing our own Qigong, and particularly by when we teach other people as well, there's this ripple effect outwards. And that in a very real way, we're actually making the world a better place. Even if it's only in a very small way, even if it's just by ourselves being more calm, more balanced, more resilient, more able to process our own emotions, that then has an impact on the people immediately around us. And if we teach other people to also be more calm, more resilient, more able to process their emotions and find their way smoothly through life, it's like it starts to ripple outwards. And when there's so much crazy stuff going on in life that most of us probably can't do a lot directly about, it's nice to think that, well, at least in having some small positive effect, that ripples outwards into the world.
Great minds think alike, because right as you were saying that about ripple effect, that's what I was thinking. And I feel that same way with this podcast. If one person is listening and can take something with them that they can apply to their own life, that's a great thing, because it's helping to change one person at a time, and hopefully have a bigger impact. And truthfully, when I took breath work, I didn't realize we were going to be working on ourselves the first 2 months. And of course, I didn't think I needed any help, but there's a lot to unpack there. And so, you do become a more self-aware and more passionate, and hopefully want to spread the word as to how good these practices are. And so my thought was too, as I was listening to you, is there a part of the world that's becoming more interested in Qigong? Are you seeing an influx of more instructors?
So in general, the English speaking world, which of course I have the strongest connection to because I'm English speaking, is seeing a great growth in interest in Qigong. And I think that's spread right across the English speaking world, that there's more and more people discovering it. I think, yeah, it's interesting. There's different groups, different demographics who are interested as well. One group it's interesting that is becoming quite interested in Qigong is actually people who've actually had a long experience with yoga. And them becoming interested in Qigong is in no way anything bad about yoga. Yoga is a wonderful and beautiful practice in its own right. But what I've found is there's quite a few people who, particularly when they get to a certain age, they start to find, you know what, actually, while they still love their yoga, they're finding it's a bit harder on their body. It's a bit more challenging for them to do the practice in the way that perhaps they used to. And they find that then Qigong gives them a lot of maybe what they used to find in yoga, but in a somewhat different way, a way that's a bit more gentle on the body, more accessible, as well as, of course, opening some other avenues of understanding as well. It doesn't mean they need to give up the yoga or anything like that, but I do find there's this group who's finding, you know what, actually, Qigong as my next step sort of fits for them, and they find a lot of benefit in that.
So Qigong is slower, more controlled movements. Is that correct?
Yeah. Well, everything with a little bit of a qualifier
Okay.
because Qigong is vast and diverse. Like there's all these different ways we can work with our energy. And some of them are very dynamic and very strenuous. And I don't want people to get the idea that that's not Qigong. It's a common misunderstanding. It's like the story of, three people either in a dark room or they're blind or whatever, and they're all feeling an elephant, and one person's got hold of the leg and one person's got hold of the ear and one person's got hold of the tail, and they've got this very different story about what it is. Qigong is diverse. Like there's lots of different parts to it. But having said that, the most commonly practiced parts of Qigong, they do tend to be slow. They tend to be gentle. A lot of the practices are done standing. So rather than getting up and down off the floor and things like that, and rather than stretching very hard into things, they're often done as slow, gentle, standing movements. Now, again, lots of other parts of the practice as well, but that's the part that most people are going to be most familiar with.
Yeah, so I was going to ask you if there are any misconceptions about it. And maybe you've already answered that.
Well, there's one of them. There are others as well. One of them I kind of touched on before is that because Qigong has historically had this connection to some different religions or spiritual traditions, sometimes people think that Qigong is a type of religion, which it's not. That would be like saying that, I don't know, a certain type of food is a type of religion. It's like, no, just because people of a certain religion eat that food doesn't make the food a religion. It's the same with the Qigong. It's just because different groups have found it useful doesn't make it the religion itself. It's a set of tools. It's a set of skills and understanding that you can apply to whatever it is that you find valuable in your own life.
Sure, sure. Do you have any tips for someone who's a beginner or might be contemplating that they're going into it, not knowing much about it, eyes wide open?
Sure. So the best thing is to give it a try, of course, because there's lots we can talk about it and you'll get like kind of an idea, but there's nothing like actually giving it a try. And that doesn't have to be too difficult of a thing. Again, if you can find a local class or something, that can be great. But you can also easily, to begin with, just try by following along with some videos that you might find on a website or on YouTube. And what I'd recommend is trying several different ones to, again, because it's very diverse, and you might try one and go, I don't like that one. Well, you know what? There's probably another one that you will like, and try a few simple ones so you start to get a feeling for that yourself. And then going beyond that, I do think it's really valuable to gain an understanding of the principles behind the practice. So doing it to experience it and then get a bit of an understanding of the principles. Now, of course, I do have some resources to help with that. We actually have a free online course, which is called Introduction to Qigong Theory and Practice, which is a great place. Whatever type of Qigong someone might end up wanting to do, whether it's some of the practices I do or something that they find somewhere else, getting that basic understanding of the principles of the theory behind it is really going to empower you by understanding and knowing what it is that you're doing to get the most out of it.
I remember when I started practicing yoga, I had a CD and I plopped it into the TV, and I did it in my living room until I felt comfortable enough to go to a studio and do that. And that really helped build some confidence before I stepped into a studio with other people.
And so easy to do that with a practice like Qigong. There's lots of very gentle practices that you can quite easily do just at home and not be too worried that you're going to hurt yourself or anything. And you can just do that gently to start to become familiar and then decide what you want to do. Do you want to seek out some in-person classes? Do you want to maybe dive into a more comprehensive online course or, whatever you want? But just make a start, try doing the practice and see how you feel, see how it makes you feel.
Right. Well, that's a good point too. So it's not age specific. You probably have a wide variety of age.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. It's certainly not. And I started when I was about 10. So that's at the young end of things. And certainly we have people well into their 70s. We possibly even have some in their 80s, and everything in between.
Mm-hmm. That's great. I like hearing that. In fact, I think I'd enjoy that a lot more than golf. I didn't like golf when I had to take it when I was younger. I'm like, I'm not going to appreciate this when I'm 70 at all. I don't appreciate it now.
And look, and this is one of the things that I think is really good about Qigong, and maybe it could be said about other things as well. But because you're learning about yourself as you do it. And so there's always more to discover, and it might surprise you what there is to discover. And it's also because it's so diverse, it means there's always, if you want to, there's always something new to learn as well. So you can just stick with the same practices if you want to go. I'm happy just exploring those, or you can constantly find some new different things to keep it interesting for yourself as well.
Great. That's great. So I guess that leads me to my question. What's your SOS? What's one or two steps that someone is listening or watching today can take away regarding Qigong?
Yeah. So one of the simplest things I'd say is going back to the breath. The breath does play such a vital role in our health and our well-being and our awareness of our energy, and that's why it has been used in so many practices around the world, including Qigong. So one very simple thing that I think is really valuable for people to do with their breath is to just start by paying attention to it, actually notice it, and then consciously slow it down. Now, the key is to do that gradually, to not go, okay, now I'm going to breathe slowly when you were breathing really fast, but to just slow it down by one count at a time. So if you count your breath and you go, oh, I'm breathing really fast, in one, out one, in one, out one, maybe. Okay, I'll go in two, out two, in two, out two. And then when that's comfortable, go, okay, I'll slow it down more. In two, three, out two, three, and so on, and gradually slow that down. When we do that, that has an immediate flow through effect to both our mind and our body. And our mind starts to calm down, our body starts to relax, and that's really beneficial, and it's, just by itself. And then the other thing that comes from that is as our mind becomes more clear, our body becomes more relaxed, it then actually starts to become easier to start to tune into this thing that can seem mysterious to begin with, but is very practical once we get used to it, and that is our energy. We can start to really feel our own energy. But it starts by preparing ourselves, actually getting rid of some of the busyness and the tension, calming down, slowing down. So yeah, just tuning in and slowing the breath by one count at a time. It's such a valuable thing to do. And it starts to open up so much awareness for us.
It does. It does. It's so simple too. It's something we can do at any time, and you can be in a car, you can be in your office, lying in bed in the morning or at night. I noticed when I started taking yoga classes and they were concentrating on the breath that I was able to take that as I was winding down at night. And so I would practice that.
Great one for getting you ready to sleep, to let go of whatever's been busy in your head. And when your head's busy, often that means there are things busy in your body as well. And to start to let go of all of that so that you can rest well through the night. Absolutely.
That's a great tip. Is there anything that you'd like to mention that we haven't talked about today?
Hmm. I think we've covered a lot, actually. One thing I'll mention, and this is, we've kind of covered this topic, but one very cool thing from this last year, because I did travel quite a lot this last year for the first time in quite a few years. I got stuck in New Zealand for 4 years with the pandemic and then some things out at the end of the pandemic. Prior to that, I used to travel quite a lot teaching workshops and things, but I was just in one place for 4 years. And so as I started to travel and teach some workshops and meet with people again, I had so many people come up to me and talk to me and say, they would say the same words to me. This is what really stood out to me. I heard the exact same phrase again and again and again as people would have this conversation with me. And they would say, John, Qigong has been life changing for me. And specifically, they would say life changing. And then another person would say, it's been life changing. I kept hearing life changing, life changing, life changing. It's like, well, this is really nice. It's really nice to hear like what an impact it's had on people. But then as I was hearing all these stories, I thought, well, while this is really nice, I don't know that I'm the most valuable person to hear these stories. That maybe it would actually be more valuable for other people to hear the stories that I was being told about Qigong. And so what I then did was I used that as some inspiration and I reached out to my community and I said, look, has Qigong been life-changing for you? If so, and you'd like to share your story, maybe you could write it down and send it in. We're going to put it into a book. And so in quite a short space of time, we actually compiled the stories of over 100 people and how Qigong had been life-changing for them. And we put it into a book, and we got it out by the end of last year. So it was really, we put it all together, and we're also going to be donating all the proceeds of the sale of that book to a charity. We haven't actually decided which charity yet. It's been very busy, but we're going to find a suitable charity and donate the proceeds, because the point of the book is not to make money or anything like that. It's just to share, like, wow, Qigong can be really valuable, and this is some of the ways it can be valuable to you. So anyway, that's one thing that has been pretty cool from the past year.
Well, what a nice outlet for people to collaborate with you and to have that community come together, and then to give away the proceeds to a charity that's deserving. And
yeah, absolutely. And we'll find, again, we haven't decided on one yet. We will, before the end of this year, we'll find one. Yeah, it'll probably be something to do with health in some form, I'm guessing, and we'll find some group that will use the money in a really useful way to help people.
So John, how can people find you if they're interested in learning more or going on your website? What's your social media?
Yeah, well, so the best place to find lots of the different resources and some of the things I've referred to is the website, which is longwhitecloudqigong.com. So that's the Qigong, like we said, longwhitecloudqigong.com. Or you can find on social media, if you look for Long White Cloud Qigong, that's how you'll find me. So you'll find us on Instagram, on Facebook. We're not really using TikTok, but we do have one or two things on TikTok. You might find us there. And you'll find us on YouTube as well as just Long White Cloud Qigong on YouTube. I also have a vlog channel where I talk about lots of questions and interesting things to do with Qigong. And that one is called Qi Life. So it's QI Life. And that's just talking about interesting topics. So yeah, those are places people can find me.
Lots of outlets for people to learn more about Qigong.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, lots of places, even on the YouTube channel, there's videos of practices that they could follow along with, or if they go to the website, they'll certainly find some there, as well as some free courses to sort of start getting a base of understanding.
Well, great. Well, I have enjoyed our conversation today, John. It's been lovely talking to you. I feel better educated on the on the art and beauty of Qigong, and I definitely would like to explore it online
Great.
and see what it's all about. And I'm just so glad that our paths crossed, and I look forward to hearing about your success of the book and the charity as well.
Great. Thanks, Susie. It's been a pleasure. Great conversation today.
Yeah, great conversation. Thanks for being on SOS for Your Life, Emergency Wisdom for Everyday Life. Well, friends, sadly, that's all the time we have today. Thank you for joining me on SOS for Your Life, Emergency Wisdom for Everyday Life. And thank you, John, for a very interesting and informative conversation on Qigong. I believe there's something out there for everyone, and Qigong is a tool in our toolbox if we allow ourselves to be open to new experiences. And I'm looking forward to hearing about Qigong's increased popularity and success worldwide. So if you're interested, a quick reminder on how you can support this podcast: like, share, and subscribe. And you can send me a review, or you can send me a question, and maybe that question will be answered sometime. So if you'd like to be added to my email newsletter, please send me your email address. If you're interested in coaching or breathwork sessions, I'm happy to chat with you. That's all we have today. So take care, and I hope our paths cross again.